What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we are checking out a suggestion from a subscriber of mine named Tyler Darkwinter, and he asked the question, hey Net, can you react to Whatculture's video about the 12 changes that George Lucas made to Star Wars later that were actually amazing? And I think part of this actually derives from the idea that a lot of the changes that George Lucas did, people weren't in love with. If you know what I mean. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about, especially if you're a big Star Wars fan. Some changes were good, and then there's some changes that are just like wacky, weird, and like why. So that's what this video is actually going to be about, me giving my opinions on what they feel is like good changes and stuff like that, and whether I agree with them or disagree with them. So if you have any other videos that you find that you want to hear my opinion on, / like reaction about, or speculation on something, let me know in the comments below, and if I use your suggestion, I'll give you a shout out in that video. So without further ado, let us jump into the video.
Sean Farrick for Whatculture Star Wars, and here are 10
I didn't know
brilliant
Whatculture had a
changes
Star
that
Wars
George
channel
Lucas
now.
made
Pretty cool.
to his saga. Number 10, expanding Cloud City. Let's kick off with a rather simple change that helps improve the tone of one of the original trilogy's standout locations. The 1997 Special Edition turned the previously white-walled and enclosed Cloud City into a wide-windowed and sprawling sky metropolis that finally didn't look like the Tantive 4 from the opening of A New Hope. In 1980, green screen in its current form was a far-off dream. Matte paintings could be used to create vast fantasy environments, but there were many issues in compositing them that created strict limitations when actors or even movement was involved. Now, with changes in day and the constant presence of clouds in the background, not only does it feel like Lando owns a city and not just a corridor, but it helps reaffirm the juxtaposition of these dark events happening at what is essentially a man-made heaven. Many of the attempts to broaden the world for the special editions, including the thriving, distinctly unscum and villainous Mos Eisley, failed miserably, but here's one case where it was a resounding success. Number 9. Orabesh.
Okay, let's talk about that. Yeah, I like that. I always thought that was one of like the best changes. In fact, when I was a kid, I never even realized that they changed that. I thought that was the way it always was, because I feel like with the original trilogy, a lot of the CGI in it looks like older. Obviously, at the time though, it looked great. And for me, I think like the more crappy CGI in certain spots, or like the more dated, I guess you could say, not crappy, dated, that's a better word. The more dated CGI just makes the original trilogy feel more like unpolished, I guess you can say, modern, which is a good thing, because I like that. I like that aesthetic. It adds to the fact that why the original trilogy looks so much more like dirty compared to like the prequels. The prequels look nice and clean, and the original trilogy looks more dirty. It looks more real, I guess you could say. And it is. So I like the fact that they were able to kind of mold that CGI and make Cloud City a lot more lived in. And I agree with that change. He mentions the Tatooine. I understand, like, there are some spots in Tatooine where I feel like they didn't have to do, what they did. Like when it comes to like the big alien camel thing that walks in the front of the picture. I don't know why they did that. That was kind of not needed. But like when it comes to like the sprawling scapes of Mos Eisley, like he showed in the CGI here, I disagree. I think that this is cool. I like this. Turn on the volume quick. I like this. Like that looks great. I mean, well, it doesn't look great, but it looks like original trilogy CG, and I'm okay with that. Yeah, I think it looks fine. So I disagree with that part, but I do agree with Cloud City for sure. So with that said, let us continue.
The Star Wars universe is a vast place. With over 30 years of almost endless tie-in material, it's become one of the most developed fictional worlds, trumping Narnia, Middle-earth, and Oz with ease. And, as any fantasy universe will have when it gains a strong enough following, it's developed its own language. Not quite as in-depth as Klingon, for which an edition of the Bible exists, or Elvish, which Tolkien had much more love for than the stories he created. Orabesh is still a mainstay of the world. Its written form was Basic, the in-world name for English. Its alphabet similar, but not quite, to our own that appears all over the games, TV shows, and, yes, films. Originally just made up of symbols intended to look spacey, it developed meaning, allowing audiences to see what exactly R2 is saying to his pilots when in space. The language didn't exist until after the first film, and thus our traditional English characters were used. When it came to the DVD, Lucas decided to rectify that and digitally change the words, most notably with power on the tractor beam controls, to their Orabesh equivalents. A small but effective change.
I like that. That's just like story building, like world building type things. It's a small change that I think ultimately impacts like the rest of the universe, and it makes the universe feel more of its own separate thing from ours, and I like that. I guess I understand if people were against that, but like whatever. I think that's one of those things that's okay. I'd let that one go.
Number 8. Ending celebrations. The original ending for Return of the Jedi is, for lack of a better phrase, an Ewok Glastonbury, headlined by the Blue Ghost Group. It does work, although only if viewing Episode 6 in isolation. As the end of the original trilogy, it feels a little downplayed, silly against the elation or desperation of the previous two. And, as the end of the whole saga, it's just laughable. Why are we ending with some fluffy aliens we only met a short time ago? Lucas addressed this in 1997 by getting rid of Yub-Nub in favour of a catchier tune, and adding in shots of Coruscant, Bespin and Tatooine celebrating the Emperor's fall, which is admittedly odd. The Empire doesn't exist on the latter, and surely the former would still be under the control of the Remnant. The DVD then added in Naboo, meaning that 3 major planets from the prequels now got a chance to celebrate. It's controversial to cut Yub-Nub, but essentially make the ending work. Number 7, removing Luke.
Yeah, I like that. It makes sense. For those people who don't know, people don't like the Empire. The people who do like the Empire are the ones benefiting from them. So when the Emperor died and effectively a massive space station that could take out the entire world gets destroyed, our entire galaxy gets destroyed, and like it was a big moment. And I think that was a good way of showing that the galaxy was happy to be finally rid of their imperial rulers, and it's the beginning of the New Republic forming again. So I think that's a really cool a cool addition. I like that, especially how they went back and added the prequels in after the prequels are out for a little bit. So I was always okay with that, including Anakin's face. I guess like I'm okay with it if someone gets mad about that. I think I like it though, because that's how we know Anakin as, and I always kind of saw it as like a Force ghost. That was true Anakin before the actual change. So whatever, I'm okay with it.
Scream.
Removing
With 3
Luke's
different
scream.
special editions of the films, Lucas has had ample time to go back on the changes he's made.
Oh, I hate that
Although
edition.
Greedo still
I don't like
shoots
that
at
edition
Han,
at all.
albeit in the same time
With
now,
Jabba.
we've seen some of the more erroneous mistakes corrected. Jabba in A New Hope remains superfluous, but he now looks less cartoony, and a trilogy-wide colouring issue on the 2004 DVD was corrected on the Blu-ray. The biggest correction, however, comes in The Empire Strikes Back, the least tampered-with movie of the originals. For some reasons that no one seems to be able to grasp, the 1997 Special Edition adds in a scream when Luke throws himself down the air chute thing in Cloud City. Apart from being narratively flawed, why would Luke scream when he's made the decision to throw himself off? The lazy origin of the scream makes it ridiculously dumb. It's the Emperor's death cry from Return of the Jedi. Realising his stupidity, Lucas removed the soundbite for the DVD. Number 6.
Good.
Cutting
Good.
down
I think I remember that now. He had a really weird scream they added in there, and then they got rid of it, which is better. I agree. That one you can't fight. That one is just better.
Vader's
No scream.
No. Yes, despite many people not realising, Lucas did tinker with the prequels when they came out on DVD. The biggest changes were made
really?
to The Phantom Menace. The pod race was extended, and that pointless air taxi scene was integrated. But the best decision made upon their immediate release, there's another change that was made later for the Blu-ray still to come, was fixing a major fan complaint. It clearly wasn't planned, but when Darth Vader hears of Padme's death, audiences the world over laughed away at his comic "No." It was just so far away from everything we'd seen of the masked character in the previous films, and tonally left us far away from the original Star Wars. Clearly, Lucas heeded the massive backlash, because the line in the DVD version is considerably shorter. Now, it's just about possible to make it through Episode 3 without bursting out laughing at the dialogue. It's only shortened slightly, but the change had a big impact. Number 5.
I never mind the scream. I see it as like Star Wars to me is a space opera, a science fantasy space opera. Some things are a little extra melodramatic, and that's because it kind of feels like it feels like it's a story being told to you. Even the beginning of the movie start with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and it's like they're introducing this idea of someone telling a story. So he's going to, make things more I shouldn't say nuance, but make things more operatic to things, romanticize stuff. Like that's what someone telling a story does. And so that's what it kind of feels like. And I'm okay with that, especially since episode 3 is my favorite Star Wars movie. I understand like the dialogue, people really being against that, but if you just kind of like sit back and you just kind of look at it as someone else telling these stories, in a way, all the movies, including the original trilogy and even the sequel trilogies, they get better because they seem like someone else is just like telling the story, and you're less like actually exploring it. You're learning it. You know what I mean? Like you're not exploring with these characters. You're learning these characters' past, or at least this romanticized version of it. So I'm okay with that. I think that's good.
James Earl Jones gets his dues. Everyone knows James Earl Jones was the voice of Darth Vader, but criminally, you could say, he wasn't credited for the first 2 films of the original trilogy. Well, criminally until you realise the reason why. Jones didn't think he deserved it. Following on from a previous controversy relating to Mercedes McCambridge as the voice of the devil coming from Reagan in The Exorcist, Jones believed he was a mere special effect, adding to but not defining the character. However, when the films turned toward Vader's story and Jones saw the effect of his voice, he decided to allow himself to be credited for Return of the Jedi. And, when it came around to the special editions, he was finally given a credit as the voice in A New Hope and Empire. A small change, but a much deserved and important one. Number 4.
I think that's interesting too about that. I agree with that. I think he should be credited, obviously. But a big thing about his character, or like him, is like he didn't think that a voiceover was really that much of a big deal. And now voiceover work is like a massive thing in Hollywood. So it's kind of interesting to see that that past, and that like how people want to view this in the past compared to how they view it now. So that's pretty cool.
CGI Yoda in episode 1. Another prequel entry here.
I agree with this one.
That has a movie-wide effect.
I like this one.
When The Phantom Menace first hit cinemas, the Yoda puppet
I hated that
worse
puppet.
than the one featured 20 years earlier in the original trilogy. Obviously, Lucas and co. wanted to honour the green alien's origins, but for a film that otherwise still looks visually resplendent in both CGI and practical effects, the puppet stood out. Of course, in amongst the rest of the complaints about episode 1, the poor Yoda was low on people's priorities, and ended up an oddity when the character became a much more nimble CGI creation for the last 2 entries in the saga. Things eventually changed. When prepping for Revenge of the Sith, a movie that features more Yoda action than ever, the VFX team went back to episode 1 and redid the puppet with the CGI model as practice for the more complicated sequences to come. And when the Blu-ray came around, it was decided to put the computerized effort into the film. And what an improvement! Now, we have a consistent Yoda throughout the prequels, and one that leads to his original appearance quite well. Number 3.
I agree with that one. That's one of my favorite changes. I remember Puppet Yoda from the VHS version of Phantom Menace, and I remember looking at him and being like, this looks weird. He looks like he should... Like, Puppet Yoda in episode 5 looked great. He felt real. And then the one they used in this one felt like more like a Sesame Street, Muppet type of character. It didn't look like realistic. And I don't know why, how they were able to do that 20 years prior, you know what I mean, with episode 5, and why they couldn't do it with Yoda then. I don't know, but whatever the case, the CGI change was good. And I still think that Yoda in episode 1 is probably one of the best looking Yodas we've had. I actually think I think like episode 2 CGI Yoda is a little wonky nowadays, but episode 1 CGI Yoda is actually pretty good, and then episode 3 CGI Yoda looks amazing. But it's still one of those things where like it's just interesting.
The proper Emperor in Empire. It was one of the bigger continuity errors in the original
This had to
trilogy.
change. This
when
had to
audiences
change.
first got to see the Emperor, the one man above Vader in episode 5, it was Elaine Baker, wife of makeup designer Rick, with superimposed chimp eyes and the voice of Clive Revel. Unnerving and enticing in equal measure, the change in design for Return of the Jedi and eventual casting of Ian McDiarmid, this time without aging makeup, for the prequels ended up making this scene feel a little out of place. To combat this, Lucas took advantage of having an in-makeup McDiarmid for Revenge of the Sith and reshot the scene with some tweaked dialogue for the 2004 DVD release. Overall, it improves both the movie, the original trilogy, and how it links to the prequels. The trifecta,
I like it
all
too.
the changes tried to do, but few did.
The only thing I would change about this scene, personally, for me, only thing I would change about this scene is I would have made his whole body, not just his head. I think his head is a little too, like, big. It's a little too, like, in your face. I would have had him kind of more, standing up, and then, even, we didn't actually even have to see his eyes. I mean, we know who he is by this point, but it's still, like, they could have just did, like, the bright mouth and nose. We don't see the eyes. We don't see the rest of the features. And just had, like, the figure standing there. We know who it is. And it'd be, like, a bigger reintroduction when we see him in episode 6.
Trifecta, all the changes tried to do, but few did. The only real issue here is that the conversation still feels restrained. Palpatine looks normal, but there's still too much airing around Vader's identity for the scene to be realistic. I'm not saying that the Emperor should call Luke his son, but there could have been a less hokey dialogue option. Number 2, no more compositing issues. In the original release of Star Wars, as it was then known on its own, there was an issue with the effects. Think of the land speeder. There's ghost lines, a splodge shadow, and not to mention, the speeder itself looks like it was just added into the frames from a sticker book. For all of its groundbreaking nature, most of the original Star Wars, and to a lesser extent the later two, effects dated badly. And not in the same way as the rudimentary CGI of the special editions, but in a this is changing cinema, but most of this has never been done before, so isn't very refined kind of way. Sadly, as the car scenes in Pulp Fiction show, dated effects can, if not properly dealt with, pull you too far out of a movie. The decision to correct many of these errors, despite probably being the genesis of the special editions, makes many of Star Wars money shots not only watchable, but still mind-blowing. There's a fine line between adjusting matte effects and adding in new scenes with CGI creatures, but if there was a release of the films that had this, and maybe the number 1 on this list, as the only change, I'd still be happy. Number 1, A New Hope.
I agree. I mean, you have the technology now, go back, clean them up. That's fine. I think that's okay.
The first change that Lucas ever made to his films after release is one of the most important. When Star Wars first hit cinemas in 1977, it was called just that. There was no episode number, no subtitle, just the series name. But George was very quick to change that. The name of the film had gone through various stages through production. The Journal of the Whills evolved into The Star Wars, which ended up being the model for a 6, 9, 12-part series, with Lucas spiritually making the 4th part. Smartly, he kept that number away from the title, as many people would understandably be confused that there was no previous 3 films. Once the film was a hit, however, Lucas gained the freedom to go back to his original idea, naming Star Wars 2, the episode 5 we all know, and more importantly, re-releasing the original film as a more syllabled Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope in 1981. This change proved instrumental in crafting audience perceptions not only of the trilogy, but the wider concept of Star Wars as a multi-episode story. But more importantly, it showed incredibly early on that to Lucas, his films were an ongoing project he was happy to continue tinkering with. And there you go. The special editions.
Yeah, I agree. A New Hope needed to be added to it. I know there's some purists out there, some original trilogy supremacists who are like, it's Star Wars. It's not A New Hope. It's called Star Wars. I don't know. A New Hope is a stupid name. It's called Star Wars. And they've come around. Like some of the really bad ones have come around. I'm not going to say the names, but some of the really bad original trilogy supremacists have since come around to the prequels, especially with Disney's release, and people have really started to embrace the extra changes that changed to not just the prequels, but also they did to the original trilogy. So, I mean, there's still a lot of things that didn't need to be added. But overall, I am a fan of a director's vision. I think that the director's vision of any project needs respect, whether it's good or bad. And I respect everything George Lucas does, even if some things might be considered worse than others. I respect them, and I'm cool with these changes. But what do you guys think? What do you think that some of these changes were dumb? Do you think that these were all good? Let me know in the comments below. Oh, and also in the comments below, let me know what you guys want to see me react to or talk about or speculate on or something like that in the comments below as well. If I use your suggestion, I will give you a shout out in that video. But thanks again for watching, guys. Please remember to like, subscribe, and turn notifications if you enjoy this video. And we'll catch you next time. Peace.